The day my life turned upside down started like any other, a regular Thursday, until my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in years, Matt, an old friend from college. We hadn't talked in what felt like forever, but seeing his name brought back memories of late-night study sessions and shared beers. The message read simply, "Hey Jack, we need to talk. It's about Sarah." My heart skipped a beat. Why would Matt be contacting me about my wife? We hadn't stayed close over the years, but curiosity got the best of me. I quickly texted him back, asking what was going on, and within seconds, he responded, asking if we could meet in person. I figured it was serious, so I agreed. We arranged to meet at a local cafe that evening after work. When I arrived, I spotted Matt sitting by the window, nursing a coffee. He looked older, more worn, as though the weight of life had taken its toll on him. His expression was somber, a stark contrast to the usual easygoing guy I remembered. As I sat down across from him, he wasted no time. "Jack," he began, avoiding eye contact, "I saw something recently, something you need to know." I felt a knot forming in my stomach, but I tried to keep my cool. "What are you talking about, Matt?" He hesitated for a moment, clearly uncomfortable. "I came across Sarah's profile, on an escort website." The words hit me like a freight train. I couldn't comprehend what he was saying. My Sarah? The woman I'd been married to for over 15 years? This had to be some kind of sick joke. But Matt's face told me everything. I knew he wasn't lying. "Look, Jack," he continued, pulling out his phone, "I wouldn't have believed it myself if I hadn't seen it. But it's her. And, well, she has a lot of positive reviews. High ratings from clients." I wanted to throw up. My mind couldn't grasp the reality of what he was telling me. Sarah? Doing that? My hands trembled as Matt handed me his phone, showing me the profile in question. And there it was, Sarah, my wife, posing in a way that left no room for doubt. My heart raced as I scanned through the comments, the glowing reviews that praised her as some sort of seasoned professional. Each word felt like a knife, cutting deeper into the image I had of my wife, my marriage, my life. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice shaking with barely contained fury. "Why didn't you just keep this to yourself?" "I thought about it," Matt admitted, "but I couldn't. I would have felt guilty not telling you. You deserve to know the truth, Jack. The truth. That's what everyone wants, right?" But in that moment, all I wanted was to rewind my life to a time before Matt's message. I wanted to go back to the ignorance of just a few hours earlier when everything was still normal. But now, that version of my life was shattered, and there was no going back. The rest of our conversation was a blur. Matt gave me details about how he'd stumbled across the site, purely by accident, he swore. He'd been on a work trip, stuck in a hotel room, and a bored colleague had shown him the website. That's when he saw Sarah's face, unmistakable even after all these years. He left the cafe, apologizing again, but what was there to say? No apology could fix what I had just learned. When I finally got home, Sarah was in the kitchen, cooking dinner like it was any other day. She looked up at me, smiled, and asked how my day had been. I stood there, staring at her, wondering how long she had been living this double life. Did she see me as a fool? Did she think I would never find out? "Jack? You okay?" she asked, concern lacing her voice as she walked over to me. I couldn't answer her. Not right then. My mind was still reeling, trying to make sense of everything Matt had told me. I muttered something about needing to take a shower, and I headed upstairs, locking myself in the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face, staring at myself in the mirror, trying to calm the rage boiling inside me. The next few days were torture. Every time Sarah smiled at me, every touch, every laugh felt like a lie. I became obsessed, constantly checking her phone when she wasn't looking, searching for any evidence of what Matt had shown me. It didn't take long to find it. Hidden messages, discreet apps, secret conversations, they were all there, confirming what I already knew. She was living a life I had no part in, a life with strangers who paid for her time, her body. One night, after yet another evening of pretending everything was fine, I snapped. Sarah was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Who the hell are you, Sarah?" I blurted out, my voice shaking with fury. She looked up, startled. "What are you talking about?" "I know," I said, my words heavy with accusation. "I know about the website. I know what you've been doing." Her face went pale, and for a split second, I saw the truth in her eyes, fear, guilt. But then she composed herself, standing up and trying to deny it. "Jack, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me," I shouted, throwing her phone at her feet. "I've seen the messages. I've seen the profile. You've been selling yourself to strangers behind my back." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Sarah didn't say anything at first, just stood there, looking at me, and then, she broke. Tears streamed down her face as she crumpled onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. But I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel sorry for her. All I felt was betrayal, anger, and the overwhelming sense that my life had been a lie. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she whispered through her tears, but it didn't matter. I had found out, and now there was no turning back. The words hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Sarah sat on the couch, her face streaked with tears, but I could barely look at her. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I just confronted her, my wife, about selling herself to strangers, and now I was waiting for an explanation that I didn't even know if I wanted to hear. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah wiped her eyes, her voice shaky as she finally spoke. "I didn't want it to be like this, Jack," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never wanted to hurt you." I scoffed, the sound bitter and sharp. "Well, congratulations, Sarah, you've done a hell of a job at that." Her hands fidgeted in her lap, twisting the edge of her sweater nervously. She looked up at me, eyes red and swollen, but still full of that desperate need for understanding. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't do it to betray you. I did it because I had no choice." "No choice?" I spat, the anger boiling over again. "You expect me to believe that? You could have come to me. You could have talked to me. But instead, you decided to. Jack, stop, she interrupted, standing up suddenly. Her voice was stronger now, more defiant, cutting through the air like a blade. "You don't understand. You're not listening." I stared at her, stunned. After everything, after being caught in the worst kind of betrayal, she was still trying to justify it. I opened my mouth to speak, but she cut me off again, the frustration bubbling out of her like a dam breaking. "I've been carrying this burden for years," she said, her voice rising with every word. "Jack, we're barely making it. You're barely making it. What are you talking about?" I shot back, my confusion mixing with the anger. "We've always been fine. We're not rich, but we get by." "No, Jack," she said, shaking her head as if I were too blind to see the truth. You get by. You collect things, you tinker with little projects, and you barely bring in any money from it. You've been chasing that dream of yours, building whatever you think will be the next big thing, but it's not enough. It's never been enough." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stumbled back, trying to process what she was saying. Sure, my work wasn't the most lucrative, but I'd always thought we were okay. I worked with my hands, fixing and creating, and while it wasn't making us rich, I thought it was enough to keep us afloat. But Sarah's tone, her anger, told me that I was wrong. "So, what?" I asked, my voice low, trying to control the storm brewing inside me. "You decided to do this? To sell yourself because you didn't think I was good enough? Is that it?" She threw her hands up, exasperated. "I didn't have any other choice, Jack. Do you think it was easy for me? Do you think I wanted this? I hated it, but what else was I supposed to do? We have bills piling up, credit cards maxed out, and you just keep collecting your little gadgets and making pennies. My jaw clenched, the sting of her words cutting deeper than I could have imagined. I'm doing the best I can, I muttered, but even as I said it, I could feel the weight of my own insecurities pressing down on me. Was that true? Had I been too focused on my projects, on chasing dreams that were never going to pay off? Sarah's eyes softened for a moment, but there was still that edge of resentment in her voice. I tried to talk to you, she said quietly. I tried to tell you that we were struggling, but every time, you brushed it off. You said it would get better, that the next project would bring in more money. But it never did. And I couldn't wait any longer, Jack. We were sinking. I stood there, staring at her, torn between rage and guilt. Part of me wanted to yell, to scream at her for what she'd done, for betraying our marriage in the worst possible way. But another part of me, the part that had been so sure I was doing enough, being enough, felt the sharp stab of failure. Had I really let things get that bad? Had I ignored the signs, so focused on my work that I missed the cracks in our lives? You should have told me, I said finally, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and pain. You should have told me how bad it was. I did, she whispered, her eyes filling with tears again. I did, Jack. But you didn't hear me. You never heard me. The weight of her words sank in, but it didn't make the betrayal any easier to swallow. I walked over to the kitchen counter, leaning on it, trying to catch my breath, trying to think. She was right, in a way. I hadn't been bringing in as much money as we needed. But this? This was her solution? So what now? I asked, turning back to her, my voice cold. You expect me to just, what? Accept that this is how you're making ends meet? That every time you leave the house, it's to meet some client? And what, I'm just supposed to be okay with that? Sarah shook her head, looking at me with a mixture of desperation and regret. No, Jack. I didn't expect you to find out. I never wanted you to know. I was doing it to keep us afloat, until you found your success. But I can't stop now. We need the money. My stomach twisted at the thought of her continuing, going back to those men, those strangers. I couldn't handle it. Not now, not ever. No, I said firmly, my voice hard and unyielding. This stops. Now. I don't care how bad things are, Sarah. You don't get to keep doing this. Not while we're still married. She looked at me, her eyes wide, as if she hadn't expected me to stand my ground. But I meant every word. I couldn't control the choices she had already made, but I wasn't going to let her keep living this double life. And if you can't stop, I said, my voice breaking slightly, then we're done. Sarah's face crumbled, and she sank back onto the couch, her sobs shaking her body. But I didn't go to her. I couldn't. All I could think about was how shattered our life had become, and how far we had fallen from the couple we once were. In that moment, I realized something: no matter how much I wanted to, I couldn't fix this. Our marriage, our life together, was broken beyond repair. The next day was a blur. I barely slept that night after the confrontation with Sarah, my mind spinning with everything she'd said. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. She had justified her betrayal by pointing fingers at me, blaming me for not bringing in enough money, for not being enough. It was twisted, and I couldn't make sense of it. Was she right? Had I failed her? Or had she failed me? By the time evening rolled around, we were barely speaking. We had both spent the day avoiding each other, the silence between us deafening. It was like we were two strangers living under the same roof, walking on eggshells. Sarah seemed on edge, like she wanted to say something but didn't know how to begin. I couldn't even look at her without the images of those messages, those reviews, flashing in my mind. I'm going out, she said suddenly, breaking the tense quiet that had settled over the house. I glanced up from where I sat on the couch, watching her grab her coat and keys. Her voice was neutral, like nothing had changed, like we weren't in the middle of the worst crisis of our marriage. "Where?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I even wanted to know. "I'm just going for a walk. Meeting up with a friend." There was a pause as I considered her words. After everything she'd told me, after everything I'd found out, the last thing I wanted was for her to be out there, meeting some friend. But I couldn't bring myself to fight. I was too exhausted, too drained. "Fine," I muttered, turning my attention back to the television. The door clicked shut behind her, and I was alone again, the house eerily quiet. Hours passed. I tried to distract myself, flipping through channels, but nothing could pull me out of the storm swirling in my head. I kept looking at the clock, wondering how long Sarah would be gone. I didn't want to care, but every minute she was out felt like another reminder of how far we had fallen. It was close to midnight when I heard a car pull up outside. I hadn't heard her footsteps approaching the door, so I stood up, confused. From the window, I could see a man helping her out of the passenger seat, her body swaying as she clung to his arm. My stomach dropped. I rushed to the door and threw it open just in time to see this stranger half-dragging Sarah up the driveway. She was stumbling, barely able to stay on her feet. Her hair was a mess, her face flushed, and she was muttering something incoherent. The man, a tall, broad-shouldered guy I'd never seen before, looked up at me, his expression unreadable. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice hard, my heart pounding in my chest. The guy shrugged, holding Sarah steady as she nearly collapsed against him. I found her walking around downtown, stumbling all over the place. She was trying to get home but couldn't remember where she lived, so I helped her out. Helped her out? I stepped forward, my fists clenching at my sides, ready to yank Sarah away from him. "And who the hell are you?" "I'm just a guy trying to help," he said, raising his hands defensively. "Look, she's been drinking. A lot. I didn't want to leave her out there alone." "Drinking?" My mind raced, and I realized with growing anger that Sarah had left to meet her friend and ended up plastered somewhere downtown, needing a stranger to bring her home. My jaw clenched as I moved toward them, pulling Sarah away from him and steadying her on my own. The moment she was in my arms, I could smell it, wine. A strong, pungent odor mixed with her perfume, making it impossible to ignore. The man nodded at me, backing off. "She's all yours. Just wanted to make sure she got home safe." I didn't even bother to thank him. My focus was on Sarah as I struggled to keep her upright, her head lolling forward as she muttered something unintelligible under her breath. "Sarah," I said sharply, shaking her slightly to get her attention. "What the hell is wrong with you?" She blinked up at me, her eyes glassy and unfocused. "Jack. I was just had a little wine." "It's fine." "Fine?" I snapped, dragging her inside and slamming the door behind us. "You can barely stand. And you're telling me it's fine?" She giggled, a sound that sent a shiver of disgust through me. "I was with a friend. We just had some wine." I guided her toward the couch, practically dumping her onto it as she swayed, struggling to stay upright. She tried to push her hair out of her face, but her hands were too shaky. I stood over her, furious, watching as she slumped back against the cushions, her eyes half closed. "How much did you drink?" I asked, my voice sharp, though I wasn't even sure why I was asking. It didn't matter. The damage was done. "Not much," she slurred, her words barely making sense. "Just a little bit. Just a few glasses." I ran a hand through my hair, trying to keep my temper in check. I couldn't believe this was happening. Yesterday, I found out she was selling herself to strangers, and now she couldn't even come home without a stranger's help. What was happening to her? To us? "And what about your work, huh?" I asked bitterly, unable to hold back. "You finish your work for the night? Or did you leave that unfinished too?" Sarah blinked, her expression confused, as if she didn't even understand the question. "Work, no. I didn't finish, didn't feel like it. Didn't feel like it? My voice was rising, but I didn't care anymore. The anger was consuming me, and all I could think about was how broken everything had become. What happened to needing the money, Sarah? What happened to this being something you had to do for us? She didn't answer. She just closed her eyes, sinking further into the couch, mumbling something incoherent under her breath. I stood there, staring at her in disbelief, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and helplessness. I couldn't believe this was my life now. I couldn't believe this was the woman I'd married, the woman who used to be my partner, my rock. Now she was lying there, drunk and incoherent, after a night out with God knows who, while I was left standing alone, trying to make sense of the mess she'd made of our lives. It was like everything was falling apart, piece by piece, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The next morning, the house felt heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. I hadn't slept, not really. After Sarah passed out on the couch, I stayed up, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Every thought was a mix of anger, betrayal, and something darker, fear. Fear of what our lives had become and what was still to come. I couldn't let things continue like this. Sarah was spiraling, and I couldn't stand by and watch her destroy herself, destroy us. As much as I hated what she'd done, what she was still doing, I needed to believe there was a way out of this mess. That morning, I made up my mind, I was going to tell her to stop. To quit her job. There was no other way. If she didn't stop, we had no future. Sarah was still asleep when I walked downstairs, her body draped awkwardly across the couch, one arm hanging off the side. The empty wine bottle lay on the floor next to her, a cruel reminder of the night before. I watched her for a moment, my emotions twisting into a knot in my chest. How had it come to this? How had the woman I married turned into this? Eventually, Sarah stirred, groaning as she slowly woke up. She sat up, rubbing her head, squinting at the sunlight streaming through the windows. She looked rough, hungover and bleary-eyed, but I didn't care. I couldn't hold back anymore. I had to get this out. Sarah, I said, my voice firm but low. We need to talk. She blinked, still not fully awake. Jack, I'm not feeling great right now. Can we talk later? No, I said, shaking my head. We talk now. She sighed, leaning back against the couch, her hands still massaging her temples. Fine. What is it? I stood there for a moment, trying to find the right words, but the anger that had been building inside me since last night took over. You need to quit, Sarah. This job of yours. It's destroying us. Her eyes flickered, but she didn't react right away. For a second, I thought she might agree, that she'd see reason, that she'd realize how much this was hurting us. But instead, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite place, something between resignation and defiance. I can't, she said quietly, but her words were steady, too steady. Can't? I repeated, incredulous. What do you mean, you can't? You have to, Sarah. You said this was temporary. You said it was just to get us through a tough time. Well, it's gone too far. You need to stop. She shook her head, looking away, her eyes fixed on some distant point across the room. It's not that simple. I could feel the frustration rising inside me, the helplessness turning into anger. What the hell does that mean? It's not that simple. It's a job, Sarah. You can quit. You have to quit. She didn't answer right away, and when she finally spoke, her voice was so soft I almost didn't catch it. I don't want to. I froze, staring at her, trying to process what she just said. You don't want to? The words tasted bitter in my mouth. Are you serious right now? After everything we've been through, after everything I found out, you don't want to quit? She finally looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that terrified me. It wasn't guilt or shame. It was calm. Like she'd already made up her mind. Jack, she said slowly, as if she were talking to a child, I know you're upset. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. But I'm not the same person I was when we got married. I've changed. I felt a chill run down my spine. Changed? What the hell are you talking about? I'm good at it, she said, her voice stronger now, more certain. The money, it's better than anything we've had in years. And it makes me feel, she hesitated, but I could see the gears turning in her head as she searched for the right words. It makes me feel alive. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Alive? Sarah, do you even hear yourself? You're saying you feel alive by doing this? By going behind my back, by... I'm not going behind your back anymore, she interrupted, her voice sharp, cutting through my words. I told you everything, didn't I? You know what I'm doing now. That doesn't make it better. I shouted, my patience snapping. You're my wife, Sarah. You're supposed to be with me, not selling yourself to strangers for money. She stood up then, swaying slightly as the remnants of her hangover still clung to her. But she didn't back down. Her expression was fierce, determined. Jack, you don't get it. You don't get what it's like to feel stuck. To feel like nothing you do matters. This job, it gave me something. It gave me control. I shook my head, incredulous. Control? You think this is about control? You think selling your body is some kind of freedom? She didn't flinch. Yes. It is. And you know what? I'm not quitting. Her words were like a slap in the face. So what now, Sarah? You just keep doing this? And I'm supposed to, what? Pretend like everything's fine? She didn't answer right away, but there was a look in her eyes, a look that sent a chill through me, a look that said she had already thought about this. That she'd already made a decision. I don't want to lose you, Jack, she said softly. But I can't give this up. Not right now. So maybe we need to find another way. Another way? I asked, dreading where this was going. What the hell are you talking about? She took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach twist. What if we open things up, she said, her voice steady, almost casual, as if she were suggesting something as mundane as rearranging furniture. But her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Open things up? I repeated, barely able to keep my voice calm. Are you seriously suggesting an open marriage? She nodded, not breaking eye contact. Yes, Jack. I am. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My wife, who I had just found out was selling herself to strangers, was standing in front of me, suggesting that we turn our marriage into some kind of twisted, open arrangement. It wasn't enough that she'd broken every vow we had made to each other, now she wanted me to be okay with it, to invite this chaos into our lives permanently. Are you out of your mind? I asked, my voice rising with anger. You think I'm just going to sit here and let you keep doing this? You think I'll be okay with you sleeping with other men while we're still married? She didn't flinch. I'm not asking you to be okay with it, Jack. I'm asking you to understand. I'm asking you to consider that maybe this could work for us. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Work for us? Sarah, nothing about this works. We're falling apart. And you think the solution is to, what? Give each other permission to sleep around? That's not a marriage. Her expression softened for a moment, and I hoped, she might realize how insane this sounded. But then she spoke again, her voice quiet but firm. Jack, I know this is hard for you to hear, but I don't want to leave you. I love you. But I can't stop doing this right now. It's part of who I am now. Part of who you are? I echoed, feeling sick to my stomach. What does that even mean? She sighed, running a hand through her hair. I don't expect you to understand right away. But I've changed, Jack. We've both changed. maybe it doesn't have to be one or the other. Maybe we can still be together, still love each other, but also have the freedom to explore other things. The room felt like it was spinning. I couldn't wrap my head around what she was saying. My wife was talking about freedom and exploring, but all I heard was her trying to justify her betrayal, trying to find a way to keep doing what she was doing without losing me in the process. It was like she wanted to have her cake and eat it too, as if our marriage meant nothing anymore, just a word with no weight behind it. And what about me? I asked bitterly, unable to contain the hurt and anger that had been festering inside me. What, Sarah? I just go out and sleep with other women too? Is that what you want? You want me to go out there and do the same thing? She didn't answer right away, but I could see the wheels turning in her head, the way she was calculating her next move. If that's what you want, then yes. I'm saying we could have that option. I laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. It was a bitter, hollow sound, one that echoed off the walls of the empty house. This is insane. You're asking me to throw everything away. Everything we built. For what? For some fantasy? I'm not asking you to throw anything away, Jack, she said, stepping toward me, her eyes pleading. I'm asking you to look at things differently. We've been stuck for so long. This could be a way out. A way out? I shook my head, my fists clenched at my sides. No. This is not a way out. This is you trying to justify what you've been doing. You don't want a solution, Sarah, you just don't want to feel guilty anymore. Her face hardened at that, but I didn't care. I was done dancing around the issue. Done pretending like there was any way this could work. I'm not going to share you, I said, my voice steady now, the anger giving way to cold certainty. I won't do it. If you want to be with other people, fine. But I'm not sticking around for it. She stood there, staring at me, her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd back down, that she'd see how insane this idea was. But instead, she crossed her arms, her jaw tightening. Then maybe we need to take a break, she said, her voice low, but resolute. Maybe we need time apart to figure things out. The air between us felt thick, heavy with the weight of everything we hadn't said, everything we had both been holding back. Time apart? I didn't even know what that meant. Was she asking for a separation? Was this her way of easing into the end? Is that what you want? I asked, my throat tight. A break? Because I'm telling you right now, Sarah, if you walk out that door, I'm not waiting around for you to come back. She didn't answer right away, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. I could see the woman I had loved for so long fighting with the person she had become. But in the end, the answer was clear. I don't know what I want, she admitted, her voice cracking for the first time. But I can't keep living like this. We can't keep living like this. I felt a lump rise in my throat as the reality of what she was saying hit me. This was it. The end of everything we had built. I couldn't believe it was happening, but there it was, hanging in the air between us like a ticking bomb, waiting to explode. Then go, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. If that's what you need, then go. She stood there for a moment, as if she were waiting for me to say something else, to take it all back. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. Not after everything she had done. Without another word, she grabbed her coat and walked toward the door, her footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. The door opened, and the cold air rushed in, chilling me to the bone. She paused for a second in the doorway, her back to me. I'm sorry, Jack, she said softly, her voice trembling. And then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a finality that echoed through the house. I stood there, staring at the empty space where she had been, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Everything we had built, everything we had been, it was gone. The days that followed Sarah's departure were like a blur, a constant haze of loneliness, regret, and anger. I had thought that letting her go would bring some sort of closure, that maybe the silence would give me space to figure things out. But instead, all I felt was this gaping void, a hollow emptiness that I couldn't escape no matter how hard I tried. The house was too quiet without her. Every room, every corner seemed to remind me of her, of the life we had built together. I'd see her favorite coffee mug on the kitchen counter or her slippers tucked beneath the bed, and the memories would come flooding back, happy times, simple moments that now felt like distant dreams. The laughter, the conversations, even the arguments, everything that made our life together real, it was all gone. And I was left alone, drowning in the wreckage of what used to be. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could move on. But as each day dragged on, the weight of her absence grew heavier, pressing down on me like a suffocating fog. I didn't eat much, couldn't sleep, and when I did, I'd wake up reaching for her, only to remember she wasn't there. Nights were the hardest. I'd sit on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen, wondering where she was, what she was doing, and who she was with. The thought of her being with other men, continuing her work, tore me apart inside, but there was something else that gnawed at me even more, the realization that maybe, just maybe, I couldn't live without her. No matter how much she had hurt me, no matter how much she had betrayed our marriage, the truth was, I still loved her. And the longer she was gone, the more that love clawed its way to the surface, drowning out the anger, leaving me with nothing but this desperate need to have her back. I didn't want to admit it at first. I fought it, telling myself that I was better off without her, that I deserved more. But the pain of being without her was unbearable, and the more I tried to push her out of my mind, the more I realized how much I needed her. On the fourth night after she left, I broke. I was sitting in our bedroom, my bedroom now, staring at the empty side of the bed where she used to sleep. The sheets were still messy from the last night we had shared together, and I couldn't bring myself to touch them, as if keeping the bed that way would somehow preserve a piece of her. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I scrolled through my contacts, stopping at her name. My thumb hovered over the call button, and for a moment, I hesitated, wondering if I was making a mistake. But I couldn't stop myself. I pressed it, and the phone rang, my heart pounding in my chest as I waited, praying she would answer. She picked up on the third ring, her voice soft, hesitant. "Jack?" Hearing her voice made everything inside me ache. I swallowed hard, trying to find the right words, but all that came out was, "I miss you." There was a long pause on the other end, and I could hear her breathing, could almost picture her sitting somewhere, phone in hand, her eyes filled with the same confusion and hurt that had been eating me alive. "I miss you too," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. The relief I felt was immediate, but it was laced with pain. I closed my eyes, trying to keep my emotions in check. I can't do this without you, Sarah. I thought I could, but I can't. Jack," she trailed off, and I could hear the uncertainty in her voice, the hesitation. "I know I said things," I continued, my voice shaking. "I know I told you I couldn't live like this, but I was wrong. I was wrong about everything. I don't care about the job. I don't care about any of it. I need you here. I need you back." Her silence was deafening, and I could feel my heart sinking as the seconds ticked by. Maybe she had moved on. Maybe she didn't want me back. But I had to try. I had to give it everything I had. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. If you need the job, then fine. I'll accept it. I'll accept everything, Sarah. I don't care. Just, come back. Please." I hated myself for saying it. I hated that I was willing to compromise everything I believed in just to have her back. But the thought of spending another night in this empty house, of waking up alone, of going through life without her, it was too much. I was willing to do anything, just to have her in my life again. "Jack, you don't mean that," she said softly, but there was something in her voice, something that told me she wasn't as sure as she sounded. "I do," I insisted. "I do, Sarah. I've thought about it, and I don't care. I'll make it work. We'll make it work. I just need you back. There was another long pause, and I could hear her breathing, could almost feel the weight of her decision hanging in the air between us. I don't know if I can come back, Jack, she said finally, her voice cracking with emotion. I've changed. We've both changed. I don't know if we can ever go back to the way things were. I swallowed hard, fighting back the lump in my throat. I don't need things to go back. I just need you. However that looks, whatever that means. I don't care. I just want you here. More silence, and then, finally, she spoke. I'll think about it. It wasn't the answer I had been hoping for, but it was something. It was a glimmer of hope in the darkness, a chance that maybe, just maybe, she'd come back. Okay, I said quietly, my heart still pounding. Just, let me know. Whenever you're ready. I will, she whispered. And then the line went dead. I sat there for a long time after that, staring at the phone in my hand, my emotions swirling in a chaotic mess of relief, fear, and uncertainty. I had no idea what was going to happen. I had no idea if she would come back or if this was the beginning of the end. But for the first time in days, I felt like maybe there was a chance. And for now, that had to be enough.